did you want to be when you grew up?
It probably changed depending on how old I was, really. So I think there was probably a time when I liked animals and so I wanted to be a vet. And then my mum was like, "Oh, you might have to like put animals down, if you're a vet." So that kind of like came and went because I thought that was probably a bit traumatic. Probably one for like a long period of time into like music and still am. So I play guitar and sing in bands and things growing up. So went to music college when I was 17, something like that. After school, went to music college. So I did kind of time playing in bands and playing in bars and restaurants and gigs and things all over the kind of north of England. So kind of music was a bit of something that I wanted to do. And then alongside that, I was doing catering. So I've been working in kitchens, again in like bars and restaurants. So maybe sort of catering was a bit of something, and then kind of stumbled into youth work and working with children and young people.
Leeds. What is happening? Welcome to episode 24 of Working Hours, a show about a place called Leeds, a time called now, and an activity called work. My name is Simon, and you're listening to my guest, Craig Blair. This is another Zoom interview recorded on the 14th of June, 2021. Hello again so soon. And you might have noticed yesterday that I am full of cold. Just a cold. So I'm going to waffle a bit here. It shouldn't be too long though. Firstly, I haven't mentioned on this podcast that I was on a podcast. It's called Light on Leeds. It's a great show and you should give it a listen. I'll put a link to my episode in my show notes for this episode, but listen to this show first. You're here now. Secondly, you might have noticed that this interview was recorded some time ago, but it's just being published now. The publishing of episodes has been erratic. I'm sorry, I don't want it to be. I want to publish episodes regularly. I want to have regularity for listeners and for myself. At the moment, I'm publishing episodes when I can, but I do so with some sense of value for the listener being considered. I don't want to publish just a lone episode if there has to be a long break between episodes. At least when some episodes come out together, hopefully a listener can feel there's plenty of content there to be going on with for a bit. I have no idea if that works for anyone other than me, but I'm in the dark with regard to what any listener might be enjoying or disliking about the show. The same goes for these intros. I don't know what to say or how to say it. Should I be, "Good morning, Vietnam"? Or should I be, "Good evening, here is the shipping forecast"? How much should I say about a guest? Is it good as a listener to discover the guest, or do you need more context and info at the beginning of an episode? I don't know. That's why these intros are usually so short. My idea is that I stand out of the way and just let my guests speak. Does that work for you? I don't know. So I am publishing episodes each day this week because I have these episodes ready to publish. That means that I have the approval from my guests for what I am publishing and that I have created the episode. I have created all the episodes of this show so far with Audacity, the free audio editing software, and I have recorded over Zoom or in person on a H6 audio recorder. I have been using my phone for my Zoom recordings as I don't have a laptop and I am slowly trying to build a suitable PC for what I want to do. I have been experimenting with these early episodes and early years of the show. I don't think that I will really know what this show is until I hit around 50 episodes. My sound on this episode is quite poor, for which I apologise. I also apologise for when the sound has been crap on any of the other episodes. The last episode, published yesterday, was created on Descript, which took me quite a while to get ready as I'm not familiar with that program yet. I know I could do things differently, and that I inevitably will as I gain more experience and practice with this project, but I want to do this more now. I need to do this more. And I can't do that on my own anymore. But I need to ramp this up. I need more for you. And hopefully you want more from me too. So, if you like this show or think it's alright or interesting, then please just go that little step more so that I can take that next leap. Do a little more and help me get more so that I can give you more in return. A positive feedback loop. More listeners. So if you haven't heard the other episodes of the show, go back right now and listen to them all. More guests. So if you haven't recorded for this show yet, get in touch with me right now and let's get it sorted. I need more resources and capacity. I need to increase awareness, grow my listenership, improve my production, and regularize my output. You need a show that improves in quality and regularizes its consistency. To do any of that, this show needs to generate revenue. So I need more Patreons. I need local businesses looking for cheap regular sponsorship or partnership opportunities. Doing a big recruit in Leeds? Buy an ad read on this show. Opening a new branch of something in Leeds? Get an ad read for it on here. I need a big enough audience to sell automated advertising, or to be able to be otherwise getting enough donations to make the show self-sustaining without having ads. So please do go that step further than just listening. Get involved. Chuck us a book or give us a share. Follow, subscribe, come on the show, and make everyone listen to your episode. Tomorrow is episode 25. In some ways it's a success to make it this far, and in others it's a failure that it's taken me so long to only get here. But today is episode 24, and right now we've heard enough from me, and we're going to hear from Craig Blair. Craig Blair is a senior practitioner for Barca-Leeds. He works in the children, young people and family teams, building relationships with partners and supporting staff and clients. Barca-Leeds support people struggling with housing issues, finances, physical and mental health problems. Their services are also geared towards children, young people and adults affected by domestic abuse, drug and alcohol issues, as well as people struggling with employment or education. Craig has been in youth work of one form or another throughout his career and takes us through that story here. To find out more about Barca-Leeds, go to www.barca-leeds.org.
Which is where I am now.
Right.
And have been probably just over 10, so probably 11 years, 12 years maybe.
Okay, so you say you stumbled into it. How did you stumble into it?
I guess like most people probably kind of find themselves volunteering on stuff and things like that. And so with the council, I grew up in Scarborough, and there's a council there who have a youth service, and they had some sort of smaller posts that are like 9 hours a week, that kind of thing, where you just sessions, do the group with the young people, maybe do 2 or 3 sessions a week, open access youth groups, so anyone who is 11 can kind of wander in. So I applied for a post there when I was probably 19, and got a job there. I've always kind of done bits whilst I was at college, like helping other students, and been involved in youth groups myself as a young person. You just end up volunteering for stuff when you're a young person and becoming like young leaders and things. And then post came up where it was a part-time post, so I could do it alongside other things and just do 2 evenings a week.
Your experience with the youth groups, was that kind of the inspiration for this could be something that you could do, or were there other people that were working in that kind of environment that you were like, that's something I could see myself doing?
Yeah, kind of a mixture really. So some of the youth groups that I was involved with when I was a young person, and I knew the staff there quite well. So I was part of an organisation called the DIY Collective in Scarborough, and it was a group of young people who were musicians and artists and creative type people. And the person who started that years and years and years ago was a guy called James Copper and his friends, who were a few years older than me. And then James is a youth worker with a council, who I ended up working with. So he was probably kind of an inspiration in a sense of someone who was into the similar things as what I was into, enjoyed doing the youth worky kind of stuff, to be able to still follow them things around music and that arty sort of stuff that you're interested in. Yeah, and in school we had a youth work office. So when I was in high school, there's a youth work team based in the school, which is probably quite unusual really. It probably does happen up and down the country, but it is maybe not really sort of common. And there was a lady called Jenny, and she was the worker there, and we'd often sort of spend lunch times and going and just chatting and probably just pestering her really, actually, to be honest. Bit of pain. Yeah, so, and then she also worked for the council. Scarborough is quite a small town, so you tend to sort of know quite a lot of people. So I ended up working with her as well. And just by doing it a bit more, once I was there for like 6 hours, I'd occasionally pick up extra shifts and extra sessions. And then in the summer holidays, I would do extra and do some more, and probably ended up working full time over the summer. And then from there, I looked at what I could progress onto. So a post came up, which was like a youth work apprentice. And so that was where you did some training and worked full time and got a salary, and you were like an apprentice. And I didn't get that sort of. Someone else got that post, but it kind of led me to think, let's look at how I can do some more formal training from it. And so applied for a degree in youth and community work, and so then I moved to Sheffield to do that. And so it was a distance learning course, and so you'd be on placement for 3 or 4 days a week, and then you would go to uni so we'd go to uni 2 days a fortnight. So Monday and Tuesday of every other week would be in uni, and do sort of 2 full days back to back of lectures, which was a bit of the system. And two full days sat in lectures, and then rather than it being spread out across the week, so it kind of made up as sort of similar amount of hours in lectures as what you would at a normal course, but it was just over 2 days rather than across the week.
Was that a bit overwhelming, just that information dump to have, once a week of just 2 days of intense information?
Yeah, so it's pretty knackering. And so I travelled from Sheffield to Nottingham to do that. So it probably is nothing, and people do it all the time. But when you're like 20 and you want to be a student, travelling first thing in the morning to get to uni in a different city is a bit of a mission, but it's fine. So yeah, it probably was quite like a bit of like just like absolute information overload. Yeah, but it just, you kind of adapt to it, and in some ways it's nice for it to be kind of some set block of time, where that is going to be like learning time. Whereas maybe if I was left to my own devices a bit and go to a lecture on one day and then a seminar the next day, or a focus group on another day, I maybe wouldn't have been quite as committed. Whereas when you have to travel and be there for 2 full days, you're kind of there and stuck and crack on with it.
Yeah, and I suppose when you get that much information in one go, some of it's bound to stick in a way more, maybe, because there is so much, like if you get a 2-hour lecture in 1 week, then of it, it's easy to kind of, that could easily fade away. But when you get that much information in one go, maybe more of it's going to stick. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go back to uni and try it a different way just to compare the two, because it's hard work. I couldn't be a student again. It's not necessarily for me, which is why the self-placement element is really good. So a lot of the coursework is reflective practice and journal writing, and so you'd maybe do a group, do some thinking about behaviour management strategies, and then you do some research into why teenagers behave in the way that they do, and then just do a bit of reflection on it and think, what we're going to do next time, or how can I do it differently, and that way of working is really useful, I think, because you get the practical element of it as well. So maybe comparing, I think like Leeds Beckett, you do 100 hours placement. So for some people that might be 1 3-hour session a week for 6 months, I don't know, whatever it works out as. But some people might just do a month. When you do it so I was on my placement for 3 years, so I did the same group, same young people. Obviously, some of them come and go, as is the nature of youth work. I was always based in the same centre and doing the same activities. I was always around, really. Yeah, and then the kind of nature of young people is you have them relationships and you have to build that. But if you're only there for a month for your placement and get 100 hours signed off, it's about starting the relationship, maintaining it, and maybe naturally coming to an end, and how you manage up things. You don't really get that experience because you're not given the opportunity to. Yeah. So placement, it's hard work to sort of be a student and essentially be a full-time worker at the same time. But definitely is I think the way to do it with these sorts of courses, where you are working with people so much, and there's only so much you can learn about people from a book, and learn about the way that you work with people, and your style of building relationships, and how you relate to people is yourself. And it's only through experience and practice and reflection that you really learn that. If you're not given that opportunity, or you don't have much opportunity to do it, then you don't become like comfortable being yourself. I mean, I say yourself, I mean, your professional self, maybe is the way. So me with my friends is a different, slightly different version of me as a youth worker.
Yeah.
Because there's always going to be some kind of power dynamic. You're the person who's got to be responsible for them and make sure they don't kill anyone in the session or have a fight or ultimately chuck them out if they're misbehaving and things. Yeah, so just kind of learning that style of who you are and how you manage situations and manage people and relationships is a really important part of learning.
When would you say you kind of cracked that? How long did you think? I mean, is that a thing that you're still working on it today? It's still continuous, or is it something where you're like, the penny's dropped here, I know what I'm doing a bit more?
You kind of get to a point where you feel like comfortable. I think you probably always are changing. I guess maybe those big sort of moments in your life. So have a child, you then become a parent and then get a different perspective. And maybe I'm still kind of the same, but have a different lens through which I look at situations. But just kind of growing up, as you mature and develop and get experience, you become more comfortable. I don't know if there is necessarily a moment when you sort of realise that you are this person, or feel like that sort of level of comfortable. And I hope people are going to be always experiencing things that challenge them. I might feel really comfortable in my setting, but then go to a completely different job, and there's a learning there about how they behave in that context and that version. So a lot of my work has been community-based. So going in from that experience, where I feel super comfortable being in a community, maybe doing work on the streets with young people, or in a community centre where they come and go as they please. Going into a school environment where I'm sort of 100% in the school as a member of school staff, I feel really uncomfortable then. So my wife works in a school, and the way that she sort of describes her job as like a behaviour support worker, I struggle because she's like, no, this is the policy, this is the behaviour policy. You have to sort of follow what the school policy is. And I mean, if they're shouting and swearing, then that's a consequence, and they have to have a sanction. Whereas shouting and swearing is just day-to-day life in a youth club. Like you kind of challenge it and you say about how we want to talk nicely, but can't give them the attention, or you know what I mean, you're not going to phone home necessarily for somebody shouting and swearing because it's teenage life. Yeah, well, so
also expression. They need to be able to express themselves and to use that term comfortable, to feel comfortable, or to start to trust. The trust comes from feeling comfortable. To feel comfortable, they need to feel that they can express themselves properly. They need to feel that they can do that in front of you. So I think that, like you said, that's an important part of that. And I think you've got to kind of expect that. You can't, especially with people that you are trying to reach with youth work, you can't be like, oh, well, you've got to behave and you've got to turn up in your Sunday best.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of the purpose, surely, is to sort of bring people who are resistant to that behavior to, like, these are the benefits of this behavior.
Yeah, and part of it is sometimes it's just the novelty of swearing and just being like, oh, look what I can do and get away with it. And the more you challenge that, then the more it kind of gets a reaction, and they go, oh, well, maybe we'll keep doing it. But if you're not bothered about it, because we've all heard the swear words that have been around for years and years and years, and so maybe when it's directed at you, you can take some more offence. But realistically, from my side, I'm not sort of bothered about it. And so if you're not bothered about it, then the kids go, oh, well, not going to do anything, so maybe I won't bother doing it anyway. They're people like what we are. I'm not sure how you and I both swear on the odd occasion, because it's just language, and it adds colour and flavour to the conversation sometimes.
Yeah, and sometimes it's needed to have that vent, to have the expression, without smashing the room up or smashing anything else up, just the outburst.
Yeah.
Let's go into some of the sessions then. So when you initially started, was it just kind of volunteering on projects that were already existing, and you were just kind of supporting the youth workers that were there? Like, how did you get into, and how quickly did you get into, like, I'm imagining youth workers sessions and people sat around in, like plastic chairs in a circle and all having a bit of a discussion. Is that, am I wrong in that image, or?
Sometimes, yeah. So a lot of the centres that I was based in across two centres. One on a council estate in Scarborough, where we had a community centre and there was pool table, table tennis, TV on the wall with an Xbox, that sort of stuff, and then some kitchen space and some chairs, sofa, that kind of environment. And so we'd maybe have 20, 30, 40 kids in on a Tuesday evening that pile in. And some of that was spent, maybe let's sit down and do a focused activity together. Sometimes we had outside the sort of kitchen area, we had some tables where we'd sit and maybe there'd just be some discussion stuff on there. And there'd be a member of staff sat there, and as young people came in and sat down and just wanted something to do or grab a drink, grab a snack, they'd have some of the conversations or they'd do some of the games that were sat on the table that they sat around. Other times it was playing pool with them and just chatting, catching up about their week. So sometimes there was kind of that really informal bit and just naturally having conversations. Sometimes we'd deliberately put activities out to encourage conversation, but then other times there would be more, we're not going to get the activities out, we are going to sit and have a conversation about something. So the other centre that I was based in was more in a village, and that was probably the more challenging session in many ways. There were few young people, but they really appreciated the session. Not that the other people didn't appreciate the session, but they maybe just a bit more bored in the community. Yeah. And so we would get lots of complaints from people on the streets nearby saying, do you know what I mean, the kids have been out and they've pushed through my hedges or they've got litter and stuff. But it's because on that Wednesday evening there was nothing else for them to do, and it was the same for Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. There wasn't anything on really, apart from I think there was like beavers and guides and stuff. They weren't interested in that, and so our session was kind of the only informal session that was on. But that was in like a hired hall rather than one that was our community centre. It was still a community centre, but we hired it rather than being responsible for it. And so that was a bit more sitting around tables and plastic chairs kind of environment, because we didn't have the pool table on the back of a van, and so we just kind of had to make do with what was there and pull stuff out. Obviously, we all had rucksacks with cards and games and arts and crafty stuff in it and things like that. But yeah, we'd always start that session, actually, compared to the other one, we'd always start that session around the table. We'd always sit in a circle and have a conversation and have a deliberate chat beforehand, before they kind of went off and maybe table tennis or some board games or some arts and crafts stuff. Yeah, so there's a bit of a mix. So it isn't just kind of sat around on plastic chairs in the community centre, but often there is quite a bit of that. That's what you do with. But there are some like amazing community centres that are just so well stocked with stuff, and yeah, it's crazy. I know in Scarborough we had one that got built just as I was leaving, that had like a rock climbing wall in it, recording studio, rehearsal spaces, sports hall. It's had loads of stuff in there. It's just amazing.
Is it in Scarborough?
Yeah, a place called The Street, and they've modernised and quite a lot, and got the other kind of community organisations hiring spaces in there and doing stuff. Yeah, and with Leeds maybe lacks some of that. I mean, there's only one of them in Scarborough. It's a big, massive building, massive project. But they came to Leeds as part of the building and the planning for that, and went to somewhere called South Beach Youth Hub, which is just in Middleton, Belial, just on Belial Road, and it's kind of changed a little bit. So that was kind of that purpose-built youth centre initially, with performance space, a recording studio, rooms where you can do hair and beauty, mechanic space, but that's now been taken over by a school. So the school use it in the daytime and operate as a school there, high school, and on the evening the youth service deliver groups there. So they have got access to that kind of space. Yeah, so there is some of that in Leeds.
Yeah. So yeah, my next question then is that what brought you into Leeds? How did you end up in Leeds? And I mean, you've been here for a while now. Was it just a job that came up, or was there something else that kind of brought you here?
Yeah, so it was just a case of a job, really. I moved to Leeds. I started my job in 2013. So yeah, so I graduated and then started in the November, something like that, after I graduated in 2013. 7 years? 8 years? 7, yeah, anyway, so 7 or 8 years now, so I've been here. Yeah. So it was just for a job. So the job was kind of the job that I'm doing now. So it was as a project worker for a charity called NACRO, which is a national organisation that does stuff generally around offender management, and they have a couple of projects with children and young people. So the one that I am on, which is the Youth Inclusion Project, was one that they ran, and in Meanwood they've got like the education site. But yeah, lots of the other stuff that they do is around like offender management and housing, support for people who are in prison and like resettlement. So when they finish their sentence and they need somewhere to live, and they're helping them to settle in the community basically and hopefully reduce offending. So just before moving, I had an additional placement to do as part of uni, because not doing one placement was enough for them, so we had to do an additional placement as well, which mine was a place called Cellar Space in Sheffield, because that's where I was living, and that was an alternative education provision for people in high school who had attachment difficulties. We had a couple of people who were in and out of foster care, or had been adopted, or just were struggling in school with their behaviour, and so they'd come to us. So I was there for 2 days a week. One of the good things about youth work is often your work is in the evening. So I did Wednesday, Thursday every week there. So I could be there from 8:30 till 3:30, and then jump off to the other side of the city to do a youth group for sort of 7 o'clock. So it works really well. Yeah, so that Cellar Space we'd have young people, and they'd come for half-day sessions at a time. So we'd split that up into a morning check-in, and then for the people who came in the morning, they do like a check-in activity at the start with everyone who was coming. So there was maybe 4 young people at a time, maybe more. So we get all 4 of them together, and then they're key workers, and we do a bit of check-in, toast, a drink, and we'd go off for an hour to do an activity. So a one-to-one activity. So it could be something more therapeutic, or it could be doing something more educational. So it might be doing some writing a song, could be doing some English and maths, could be doing some cooking. And so we try and translate all of that into a therapeutic activity and an educational activity. So if we're doing cooking, then we're writing out the recipe. So everyone would do the same recipe a week, have a different recipe for each week. So we'd be writing out the recipe, we'd be weighing out the ingredients, building them skills, and then reflecting on it, but also reflecting on what's the temperature like, how does this feel? Is it soft? Is it hard? Is it rough? What do you think it's going to taste like? And so doing them internal reflective activities and thinking, how does something feel, becomes like a natural conversation. So that it translates to, how do we feel? Sometimes we might feel a bit soft, sometimes we might feel hot and angry. And if this feels hot, or we put some meat into a pan and it sizzles, or it's fizzling like it's really angry, and just having those reflective, therapeutic sort of style conversations with people. And so then doing that kind of activity that was one-to-one. So then we'd then switch around the young people, and we'd sort of switch young people. So a young person would come to me that was different, and the one that I was working with would then come after break to do a different activity. So they might go see the art therapist, or they might we did have an English teacher that would come in and do English, or we had a smoking cessation officer as well. So they might be going and doing some things around stopping smoking. Yeah, and so it was from that job really that I'd seen this job when I was applying for jobs, as you do when you graduate, and it was as this project worker on the Youth Inclusion Project, and it was around working with 8 to 13-year-olds who are at risk of engaging in crime and antisocial behaviour, and doing group work after school, one-to-one stuff in school, and kind of felt like a really nice fit to the experience that I'd got from placement and the additional placement at Cellar Space, of doing that one-to-one stuff and that reflective things, and some more focused learning activities, to then having space on an evening to come and do something that's slightly more fun and engaging. So I applied for that and got it, and moved, and that was where I came. But it kind of felt like a really nice fit because of having the experience of doing stuff at Cellar Space, which felt really up my street, the sort of way I like to work.
Yeah. So was that you were given sort of quite a lot of freedom at Cellar Street, and then it's like I'm really enjoying this now. I want to develop this further and do more of this, and I've got ideas that I want to try out.
Yeah. So Cellar Space, they had maybe like a couple of students. So that they had a social work student and they had myself, but they had a regular thing about taking a student each year. So they're quite used to having students. I guess we're both final year students as well. So we'd to say you're working with incredibly like vulnerable young people and you're just getting passed around to some university students. In some ways sounds a bit risky, but I guess we're quite experienced and
you're closer to the age as well, so it makes you more relatable, surely.
Yeah, in some ways, yeah. I don't know. In some ways being close to the age is beneficial. So when I first started youth work, I was 20 so it's probably 19, 20 when I got the job. So some of them were able to come until they're 18.
Yeah.
And 25 if they had additional needs for my first job. So didn't often get people who were over 18, but occasionally we'd have people who were sort of 17, turning 18, coming to session. I was only a year older than them.
Yeah.
I went to school with them. I went to the same school that was near the estate. So there were definitely people who I was at school with who would come into the group, and I was there as a paid member of staff, and they were there as a young person wanting to come along. So there's definitely...
Was that off-putting to you? Was that off-putting to you at that point of like, I mean, it's hard to command respect when you kind of appear at the school.
Yeah, in some ways.
Kind of a level of authority there.
Yeah, so it wasn't often, but there were definitely like a handful of people who I knew from school who came to the sessions.
Yeah.
I think I was very fortunate in that setting. You probably wouldn't get as good a team, I don't think, very often. Maybe everyone says that about like the people who they work with, but like as a first kind of job, I couldn't have like got a better team really. So so there was me, a lady called Jill who basically worked on the estate for like years and years and years, so knew everyone and their dads and friends with their grandparents and stuff. So she knew everyone. A couple of the other blokes who staffed it as well, and it's really like male heavy and staffing wise. They wanted to just because that's what the staff team looked like. Two of the other blokes were called Paul and Rich, and one of them was a plumbing salesman, so sold like plumbing parts, and then the other person was similar thing but like building stuff. So knew a lot of the families and the dads of the kids who came, just because he'd go and sell them plywood and stuff, whatever you'd build with, because I don't know anything about building or DIY, but he would be going to their site all the time and selling them. He'd sell people like cement and things. So he knew him, and then all the other ones who were like plumbers and stuff. The other guy would be there and know their parents and be like, "Oh, I saw your dad yesterday. Oh, I've got that party for your dad." So they knew like everyone, just because of the nature of the work that people did on the estate, and that they're all like labourers and brickies and stuff. So couldn't really have asked for like a better team. So they were blokes who were the same age as the dad and mates with the dad. And the person who was kind of running it was the person who'd been on the estate for ages and knew the parents and grandparents and things.
Yeah.
So for me to just turn up as a 19, 20-year-old didn't really matter, because I couldn't get it, because the staff team was already so well established and known that you get their respect just by being like associated with them in some ways.
Yeah.
You have to do your own bits of relationship building individually, but as a member of staff, and I guess they just appreciated it. So you didn't very, very, very rarely did you have to shut anything or stop anything early and stuff, because they just wanted to be there. And if someone was kicking off, the kids would deal with it themselves. To be like, get out. If you've been asked to leave, I'd rather you got out than all of us have to leave.
Yeah. Because
that would generally be the situation, is that if you don't leave, then we have to just close the session and everyone has to get out. So they would just like, just clear off, just go, because we want to stay. I mean, we did two sessions a week there. So we did like Tuesday and Friday, I think it was there. And they just wanted to be there, because if they didn't get to be there, they'd have to just sit outside in cold and wet, or it's sunny, it's nicer, but they'd rather be inside doing something productive, I guess.
That brings me to last year then. How was that? I mean, just talk us through, was it like lots of things planned that had to be replanned, then cancelled, and everyone being furloughed? What happened?
I mean, I haven't really talked about my work at Barca an awful lot, but so at Barca, I don't think anyone was furloughed. I'm almost certain that we continued. So we're kind of like an essential service. Everyone had to diversify in some way or change what they did. I don't think we had to necessarily cancel an awful lot. So often the work that we do would be in school. Obviously schools then closed and everyone went home. So we then had to try and find spaces that we could do stuff in the community. So lots of occasions it was just going around, knocking on the door, maybe seeing them on the doorstep, going out for a walk, walking in the community. Leeds has got lots of nice parks and nice places that you can walk. Equally, it's got lots of places that aren't necessarily suitable to be walking and doing intervention style sessions with young people. We don't do an awful lot of like worksheet based work, but we kind of do lots of games, or when we're doing our one-to-one sessions, so that would be like me and the young person on our own having a conversation or a piece of thinking. But to do that in a when you're kind of walking isn't necessarily the right kind of environment for it. So we had to learn how to adapt the stuff that we did into conversations, or Google mapping where parks are, or finding how quickly we can get to a bench that we can sit down and have a proper conversation. Although walking does lend itself to having some good conversations in some ways. We did lots of food parcel delivering, as I think lots of people did, putting together packs for doing work at home, making sure that kids had just the stuff that they needed, like pens and pencils and rulers and paper to write on. Tech, so things like laptops or tablets and phones. And lots of what we did was making sure that young people who didn't have anything but were entitled to it through school, which kind of like, can they get a tablet because they need to be able to engage with the online learning? So it's been like a bit of a link between school and home, or equally just making sure they had a place. So maybe a parent was struggling, and so they would find it hard to engage kids on the online learning, speaking with school and saying that they find it really hard at the minute. If you've got a space for them, I know that they're not technically like a key worker place, or they're not a vulnerable child in the sense that they've. So the list was have a social work involvement or have an education healthcare plan. Lots of our cases do have social work involvement and education healthcare plans. So some of them could access places, but others don't, and so they were maybe vulnerable in the sense of parents who are just struggling with their own emotional mental health, or struggling to just get their children online with lack of tech or lack of just internet in the house. So making sure that they had a place that they could go to school. The kind of like governing body of youth work is called the National Youth Agency, and so they've done lots of work around guidance and how to make things COVID secure. We were able to kind of like pick stuff up. Yeah, it's a really different world. I mean, obviously, but for us who were generally very like youth work focused and young people focused, so because our age range is 8 to 13, the 8-year-olds are still very young, and so they often don't have their own phone. Probably 11 plus have got their own phone. Even then, not necessarily for some of our young people. Or they wouldn't have phones, and so we're often having to go between parents. And even those that have phones, children don't know how to talk on a phone. They're not. A phone is not a device to talk people on in a sense of putting next to your ear. A phone is a device for playing games, and for watching videos and talking to other people I like.
Yeah. And
so for us as professionals who want to have a verbal conversation, sometimes it's quite hard. Even a text conversation sometimes with them was painful because they don't really text, or they get too distracted by what's going on TikTok, or they're on a game or something. So, and then a game is definitely much more interesting than a conversation with me.
So were you working more, less, the same, or just different? Was the organisation quite kind of ahead of the curve and planning like we're going to be locked down, and they were already making plans, or was it being very reactive? Or because it was hard to know what the hell was going on at that point. Like everything, there was lots of people some people were like, no, it's not going to change anything. And then when it did go to lockdown, it was like, well, we can't do anything now until, you started to figure out ways to work around it. And other people were like, right, this is coming. We've got to be doing this. We need to adapt everything. So
yeah, I don't think we were quite at that level where we were like, obviously we're a charity, and so not everyone has got laptops or the capacity to work at home. A handful of people had, like management had laptops, and a couple of people had laptops. but they weren't necessarily set up to work from home as their full-time base. And so there was definitely a mad rush to like, let's get ordered hundreds of laptops, and they need to have a VPN sorted so they can access their work at home, and database needs to be all online. But equally, there was kind of it's business as usual, because we're working with some very vulnerable clients who still need to be engaged, seen, and supported. And so, yeah, so we kind of were a bit of a mix. So it was you're working from home, but you still need to be seeing your clients, and you still need to be doing the actual work that you do, because you're still a key worker in that sense. And so office space is reduced, but if you need to pick stuff up, then you need to come and get stuff. And we obviously had to come in and get things because of the work that we do. We needed to get activities or get food parcels. So we are also like a COVID hub as well. So we do, or other parts of the organisation, not my team, but the other teams, the Better Together team particularly, they do lots of like food parcel putting together. So if someone rings up the council and says that they're shielding or isolating and don't have any access to food, and they live in like West Leeds, then they'll come to us and we'll get in touch, send them a food parcel, make sure they've got everything they need, go shopping if they need some shopping, getting or prescriptions. So we did a lot of that, managing volunteers, recruiting volunteers, and then now we do, if there's been like a spike in a particular area, because they're kind of getting notified of areas that are hotspots around Leeds. It's amazing in many ways that the council and NHS can pinpoint literally like a couple of streets that need targeting. So we're doing door knocks, making sure that they've got information, making sure that they've got tests, telling them to get booked into a test, reminding them that the mobile testing station is in what area it is. So having to be really, really responsive to what was going on at a very sort of micro local level. And then now there's a vaccination bus. So a vaccination bus is going to be in a certain area, so making sure that people in that area are aware of it, they can go get a vaccination.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's lots of like diversifying and changing and adapting the work that we do. So yeah, particularly for the Better Together team, because they are their teams around public health, but particularly around like eating and general community wellbeing stuff. So they kind of had to adapt a little bit around COVID health rather than general community health stuff. So it's very they kind of bore the brunt of it in many ways, doing lots of parcel delivering, and which in was so good as just as keeping your mentality and having to have a focus and a job to do, whereas lots of us who were stuck working at home were like, oh, we're just back in the spare bedroom that is in boxes and games and random stuff that our spare bedrooms, or it just in their bedroom because they live in shared accommodation, or in a living room in a shared house, whilst two other people are trying to work and share the broadband that's coping with 4 Zoom meetings going on at the same time. Yeah, but they were in the office all the time because they were, well, I mean, say they were in the office all the time. They were based in the office, but they were out all the time just delivering parcels and shopping and ordering food, putting bags together to give out to the community. So they had a really clear focus and set stuff to do, whereas at home for my team particularly, it was really having to like adapt and change what we do. We weren't doing our groups that we'd usually do, where we're maybe doing 6 groups a week with that full stop. School sessions where we'd need to be doing like 15 school sessions a week was stop because they weren't in school. Even when we could do visits, they were limited to like 15-minute visits on the doorstep. Just because of not wanting to spread stuff, and that's just from our side, let alone parents that were then maybe anxious themselves about children spending time or them spending time with or other people from outside their home. Yeah, so it was really like different.
Yeah, it sounds like you were doing more, but also that it was harder to do. But then potentially, I'm also imagining that with lockdown, there was a level of some of the stuff slowed down as well.
So because sessions are only 15 minutes compared to where we'd usually do 45 minutes to an hour. And so we'd see, and some parents maybe didn't want us to visit, or people were isolating because that happened quite a lot. Actually, we had a lot of time. I mean, we always got stuff to do. We always got assessments to do, and phone calls to make and people to talk to, and we did. So we changed from doing centre-based activities to doing like outreach. So we were able to do detached work. So detached youth work is essentially just walking around an area, seeing if there's anyone around, chatting with them. Doesn't really matter if they're a young person or if they're older, just chatting with people, making sure they're okay. Generally, like, it was quiet. We did some bits with the police and went out with them, went out with different community organisations, youth service for the council, went out with a lot, and so we could cover like a wider area. I mean, just go back on our phone and look at our steps for them days were just wild. With just so many steps, like sort of 20,000 plus a day, because we're just traipsing around Hare Hills and Teacroft and just trying to meet people. Well, not trying to meet people, just the people are out, making sure that they're safe, and do they know like good practice stuff around social distancing, getting a test, know the symptoms. Ideally, we go home. You shouldn't be out necessarily. Yeah, but it actually was quiet in many occasions, and then we eventually started delivering some more focused activities in Hare Hills and Seacroft, where we would put on an activity at certain times. That kind of sped things up a bit, because as stuff generally eased. Although we weren't allowed to do stuff inside, we were allowed to do stuff outside. So putting on some kind of community sports days where people come and play cricket, and that was really nice. Yeah, really good way to spend an afternoon playing cricket and football. And
it sounds like a lot of your job is kind of like, doing various arts and crafts and games and things all day long. I mean, do you have sort of particular hobbies that outside of work that you kind of feed into it, or do you just kind of get all of that from work?
Yeah, a little bit. I think that's why like youth work does kind of attract people who are musicians or artists or people who are into kind of like creatively, because you end up just doing that as part of your work. Or people who are into sport as well. So we've got a couple of people who are really into the sport, and so when you're doing football and cricket, or you've spent time growing up going to sports camps and things, and you learn them little games and you can pick them up and deliver them just where you are. But yeah, so I still play guitar and sing and do music-y sort of bits occasionally, not very much. I don't even do that necessarily massively at work. Occasionally I'll take a guitar and some percussion stuff and we'll play, but not very often really. Did have a guitar in the office at one point that we'd play and do little guitar lessons and things. Yeah, but it's definitely a good sort of space to be able to have some skills around crafts and art and things. And if you're creative, then you get to just pursue them a bit more and learn them skills about how to teach others to do it, and help them develop their skills or follow what they're interested in.
So I want to get in a little bit to when you were talking about your qualification and sort of within the area that you're working in. It's a charity, so you're third sector, yeah?
Yep.
But I would imagine that you kind of fit into the landscape of health and social care in Leeds.
Yeah, so we're a bit of a weird organisation in some ways, in that like we kind of do lots of things around. So some of the projects in Barca are very like health based, like community health based. So one of the projects that we were doing a few years ago is called. It's part of Lincoln Leeds now, but it's people who are in the GP who are maybe going to see the doctor and they don't particularly have a health need that the doctor needs to see them for. And so it's maybe that they've got some mental health difficulties around depression or anxiety or something like that, but they've got some medication, or they've got a plan with the doctor, but they still keep going to see the doctor. Maybe it's just out of loneliness and isolation, or having something to do, or just wanting someone to talk to, but it doesn't actually need to be a healthcare professional. Yeah. And so they could then make a referral to this team, who would then go and see the person who was maybe doing that, and link them with some community organisations that were maybe doing walking groups or music groups or arts and crafts, or just had talking groups, and would signpost them to that as something for them to do, or yoga, swimming, just because they maybe had forgotten that these things are around and were not getting in touch with them. Or they maybe hadn't thought actually just going to talk to anyone would be good rather than talking to a GP. So that's kind of like their sort of adult kind of stuff that we do. My project is mostly is with the Youth Inclusion Project, which kind of has a lot of social care involvement, as in children's services, kind of sit in between community work and school, which is kind of a statutory thing, and maybe social care sometimes are involved, or family support workers are involved. And so we're a commissioned service by the council. So the council essentially commissioned us to deliver the project, which is, so on paper it is to work with 8 to 13-year-olds who are at risk of engaging in crime and social behaviour, and work with them for up to 6 months to help them reduce their likelihood of engaging in offending in the future. But what that looks like actually is, although like the council could run this for themselves and do it, but maybe as a charity we come across slightly differently. And so for some people, maybe seeing a Leeds City Council badge is potentially a barrier, because they might just associate that with social care, or feeling like they have to then do the work with us. But actually it's not compulsory to engage with the Youth Inclusion Project. They're completely free to say no if they don't want to. We might challenge that or try and persuade them about the benefits and the upsides of it. But if they don't, and they don't want to, and they don't have to. But maybe sometimes if there's a council badge, they might go, "Oh, I've got to," because, do you know what I mean? And social behaviour teams and social workers all wear the same badge as well, but the title's just a little bit different on it. Yeah, and so it maybe doesn't feel as voluntary if it was with the council, whereas we can maybe spend that time persuading them to engage in. If they don't want to engage in the Youth Inclusion Project, then maybe they want to engage in some of our other community youth work stuff that they'll do, and they can build a relationship with a member of staff that way, and some of the voluntary stuff that we've got going on, and then eventually engage with the Youth Inclusion Project and some more focused supportive work rather than not engaging in anything. Yeah, so I guess that's the sort of sides, is that we can spend that time getting to know them, getting to know the family, and maybe they have got some additional needs going on within the family that is around housing or debt or health stuff that they maybe haven't spoken about to someone else before, or someone hasn't helped with in the way they wanted help. But we can maybe get time and say, what is the sort of housing stuff, and we can then put a bit of support around housing, or support around managing finances, or helping them look for work, because we know other projects that do that, and so we can make a referral to an organisation that will help you with that if you want, or someone else who works in our office is a person who helps with people finding work. Maybe we could get them to come and talk to you as well. So we're already like linked up, or maybe it's substance misuse. Well, we run the young people stuff for Forward Leeds, so we can help with linking you up with some misuse support. And we'll come to their meetings with you, and we'll sit with you whilst you make these phone calls. And so maybe it's just feels a little bit different when it's a person from a charity coming than a person from like the council. Not to say that the council is a bad thing, but because it definitely isn't. There's definitely like amazing people.
It's authority, isn't it?
But it's just a different, maybe like a different feeling. And actually that is really important, that sense of choice, because it isn't very often that people change their behaviour because they've been told they have to.
When people want to help themselves, that's when they can be helped.
Maybe people will change when they're told they have to, but like actually what we want them to do is to recognise themselves. Actually, maybe I could do with some support. Maybe I could do with changing some of my behaviour on this. And that's when things are really good, because then it adds a bit of motivation, adds a bit of reasoning for actually, I want to change, and I can. That's what we're trying to do, is to give them some goals and give them some aspiration and confidence and self-esteem to be able to. I mean, if they've got a goal, then you already don't feel very confident, but if you feel a bit more confident, you might be willing to go for a goal a bit more and put yourself out there a bit more. Recognize how some of the behaviours that they're doing, throwing stones and hanging around with peers who are maybe not the most appropriate, or engaged in substance misuse, or doing that thing where you hold onto the back of the bus as it drives off, and what the risks of doing these things. You're not necessarily going to have that chat with your best mate who's also doing the same thing, like, well, what's going to be the consequence if we do this? Whereas if you've got a person who you can talk to about that sort of stuff with, who will give an honest answer rather than, it'll just be fine, kind of, let's do it because it's a laugh, like your friends might when you're 12.
I mean, it's that public service thing again of like, if you haven't been taught a thing, you don't know a thing. And you know, if you've not been taught not to play on the railroad, you don't necessarily know not to play on the railroad. I mean, it might seem completely logical, but you might think, oh well, I can just get out the way, or I'd hear it. You need to be told those kind of things. So I think that's, you know, that's a large part of the work as well, surely. You know, because you're educating and supporting and
yeah. What is normal to some people, I might go, that is just obscene. Why is that normal? But they might look at my life and go, that's normal for you. That is mental. Why'd you do that? And I mean, everyone's different. Everyone's got a different way of structuring their life. Some people that's maybe more harmful or will end up in with more challenging and dangerous consequences than other people. I think, like, thinking about the language and stuff at the start, we were talking about swearing, but for some people that is just, they're used to hearing that. That's how their parents talk, that's how their parents talk, that's how their friends and their family talk, that's how life just is. And if it's usual to speak like that, then it's all you know. And when you're 8, all you know is your friends and your family. I mean, and so one of the good things, another sort of good things that we do is we get people from all over the city to come together occasionally. So we'll do trips in the summer and trips in half term. We might do lessons and stuff together. And so you'd get some people from Seacroft with people from Bramley and Armley and people from Middleton and Belial, Hunslet and Holbeck. And they just get to experience what different people are like, different backgrounds, different areas of the city. And I mean, we're often out on the bus or in cars, and they get to just go places where they've maybe never been before, even though it's just in Leeds. It's just a different area that they've never been. I mean, it's crazy talking to some of these kids, and they've never been to town before, or never been on a train, or I mean, I guess maybe growing up in a fairly small town like Scarborough, I mean, just going to town was quite normal. We'd go with our friends, even in year 7 and 8. I was allowed to go into town on the bus with my friends, and that was just what we'd do. And it's no further than Middleton to town is, but some of these kids have just never been, and their world is Middleton, because that's just where their friends are, and it's just what life is like for them, and they've just not had some of these experiences.
Yeah, it seems not possible because we're presented so much with images of, you know, do everything, go everywhere. You know, so most of us are under the assumption of, well, you've at least had a holiday to Spain, or you've had this, or you've had that, or
where some of these kids haven't ever been on a train before and never had these experiences. Whereas for me, getting a train was part of life. We'd go to York and we'd go to Scotland and we'd go away all the time, and it's just amazing. And so that's one of the things that's really good about what we do, is that we get to give them these experiences, and that broadening of experience gives them sort of more, it sounds really cringe, but gives them more opportunities to dream about stuff and think about what they want to do, because they just see more stuff. And the more you experience, the more you find what you like and what you don't like. We might go climbing, or we go motorbiking or canoeing and things. It's oh, my life, I've never done this before.
Yeah.
Just been doing a project at Wesley's Activity Centre, and a girl there, loads of people there, but one of the girls there, she's been doing climbing and canoeing, and we did this thing where you sort of run down a big water slide, and she just loves it. And she would absolutely smash all of the lads on the climbing. The thing where leap of faith thing where you jump off something that's 20 foot tall. She was just straight up, jump off, down, straight up, jump off. And lads who are 2 years older than them would just in it when they got to the top, don't dare get up, don't want to stand up. And she would just up and off, and she'd just love it. And we're remember this in a couple of years' time when you're thinking about work experience and what you're going to do. See if you can come here and learn how to do this, give other people that experience. And if you find something that you enjoy, find something that you think, oh, this is really interesting, that inspires you, then why not pursue it a little bit more and get them experiences? But you know what I mean? If you've never experienced things like going climbing before, you've never experienced things like going downhill biking, mountain biking and stuff, and you don't know you like it. And it's all right if you don't like it. It's not a problem. You just learn something. That's all. You just learn you don't like something. It's not for you. It can't be about everything.
As much important to know what you don't like as what you do like. In fact.
Yeah, of course. And food, we do stuff like cooking, and we used to do a session it was just me and a colleague with 2 kids, because they're quite high risk and lots of really challenging behaviours and stuff. And so doing a group with them involved was often quite chaotic. Yeah, we did it. It was in a church, and they're like climbing on everything and pulling stuff off the wall. So we didn't necessarily go or come back to the session, but we used to do a group with just the two of them because they're best pals. And every week we'd bring a different fruit, and we'd get them to try different fruits because they'd never like tried stuff before. So like things like mangoes and passion fruit was one that we gave them. We must have smashed about 12 passion fruit between us, and they're just like, this is like amazing because it's so like sour and sweet, and they've never had it before, and they just like didn't realize that something could be so sweet and wasn't like a fizzy drink or wasn't as sweet that they could like buy from a shop. But it was fruit, and and obviously because passion fruit looks disgusting when you open it up, you're like, what is this? It's like, what is this like pile of snot in here? And they just like loved it, and it was that experience of just trying stuff that they've never tried before and learning about different countries, from where the food comes from and what they eat. Cooking was a big part of what we did at one period of time. Just do cooking every week, making curries and Chinese food and stuff. It's so good. One, because you get to eat with them, and I think eating as part of our session is something that's always been like really important. Just kind of like having that moment where you sit down together, because maybe in the houses they don't have tables where they can sit as a family. And so when you've got a group of 10 kids and you all sort of sit down together and say, we're going to eat and we're going to have a drink together and we're going to use plates and cutlery and stuff, and they're just not used to it. Obviously some people are, but lots of the kids that we were working with, they were living in like overcrowded houses and maybe not eating food that's been homemade, and for them to learn how to make it and then eat it and taste it and think that it's nice, or even think it's not nice, then it's a really nice experience to sit down and just chat and have say, look, this can be calm, this can be nice, and it's like all you're doing is sat down eating off a plastic plate in a Grotty community centre, because that's what you do. But
so I mean, the obvious job satisfaction is that kind of stuff of just like people, seeing people having new experiences and being able to give that to them. But as well, you're working with at-risk kids, or you have been working with at-risk kids. Is there any way for you to know that you are making an impact and making them less at risk? Like, is it just anecdotal, or can you see that in data as well, or
it's quite difficult, as you can probably imagine, how you track someone is at risk and how sort of successful you are. So we did do something a while back. So it was a couple of years ago. We worked with like the youth justice team in Leeds, and we took like a cohort of young people that we've worked with from across a period of time. So maybe we took 2 years worth of young people's data, and we corresponded it with their data about who'd come into contact with them. And I think it was like 7 or 11% of the young people that we'd worked with, then within a sort of 5-year period or whatever the time period was, then come in contact with the Youth Justice Service. So I guess in some ways, but we wouldn't know that the remaining 89 or whatever percent it was would ever have come into contact with them, but we don't know. So we've got like referral criteria, which is based on kind of like evidence around previous offending and what needs to be going on in a child's life for them to potentially be engaged in offending. So they're looking at who's currently in prison and what their family situation was, like what their grown-up situation was. So we try and support young people who are looked after, because we know that due to their circumstances, they're more likely to potentially engage in offending behaviour or end up in prison. Children whose family members have been in prison are then also more likely to end up in prison themselves or engage in offending, or people who are not engaged in employment, education or training are going to be more likely to. People with mental ill health, again, more likely to be involved in offending behaviour. So we then translate that to being younger. So speaking with schools, have you got anyone who is getting excluded on a regular basis, who is going to risk of accessing off-site provision? Can we do some work with them? Have you got any children whose parents are involved in offending, parents who engage in substance misuse? Can we do some work with them, get in early and make sure that they at least know some information around risks, and people who are already engaging in antisocial behaviour, maybe not sort of criminal point, but already doing them things around like throwing stones, running in the road, hanging around with people who are older, those sorts of behaviours. see, have you got any people like that? And then can we give them some support? So, I mean, we can't in the future and know who is going to be involved in offending behaviour, but we do know from data about what makes or what circumstances people have that makes them more likely to. And so we try and work with young people who meet that kind of criteria. So maybe parental offending or sibling offending, negative peer group, risk of exclusion, struggles to manage anger and big emotions. Yeah, them sorts of young people. And we try and speak with lots of schools and have lots of good relationships with partners in school and in the community and get to know them and hopefully, encourage them to put in referrals. Yeah, so it is that they then get like a target piece of work for that young person offered to them.
Tell us some success stories. I mean, you must have some anecdotal evidence of you must have had people come back to you and say, like, Craig, if it hadn't been for you, I'd have been banged up years.
No one. They're all terrible. a joke. Yeah, so we have some new people that are like completely changed, like they just know how to communicate better with their parents and knowing how to communicate better with school. We've got children who have had ADHD, were just absolutely going off the rails in school, and then we've just helped them to understand how they recognise how they feel, and now they're just in school. They were getting to that point where they were going to be excluded, going to an off-site provision or a specialist provision, and now they're managing in full-time education, managing in school, like a mainstream school, knowing how they understand themselves more. People who are working, I saw a young person a while ago on the bus, and he's got himself a job, and he's holding that down, and he all sorts of difficulties with sort of mental health, but lots of people that we come into contact with doing well in school. People who are 8, maybe when I first started, and now only just sort of 15, 16. So, so getting to that point.
Well, you might see the fruits of your labour.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we often don't. Occasionally we'll have maybe conversations with professionals in school that we know and say, oh, how are they getting on now? And they're like, oh yeah, they're getting on all right and stuff. But because we are an intervention for a short period of time, we maybe don't always see them again or hear from them again. Sometimes we've done some pieces of work in the past where we've said, can we get in touch with you at sort of different points throughout the year, and we'll just sort of track how things are going. And for those young people that we did that, they were doing well after a year. So we'd ring them 4 times a year and just check in and say, how are you getting on? Do you need any more support? We felt like we'd do 6 months of really intensive work with a young person, sometimes a bit more than that, and a family, and then we'd just go, just because of the sort of nature of the project was that it was a 6-month piece of work. If they were maybe struggling, then we'd say, well, let's get in touch with school, and we'd get school to check in with them or remind them of stuff that we've done with them, and say, oh, do you remember how when we were doing this, and remember how you thought about this? That was really good. And then we said we were going to go to this group more regularly, then you keep going to it, just reminding and going over stuff. And when you talked about success stories, one of the things that another team does, they said, oh, what do you think success looks like for us? And we're like, oh, do you know what I mean? So they work with children or work with families who are going through care proceedings. So the children are going to be removed or have been removed, and they've got to do some work around their substance misuse to be able to get their children back or keep the children with them. And there's oh, what do you think success looks like for us? Oh, well, they're not engaged in substance abuse anymore, and the children live with them full time. And they're like, no, success looks like that child or children being safe. Success is that child being safe and well. For us, it doesn't matter where they are. Ideally, we'd like them to be with their parents, but if they're engaged in substance abuse, then they're not safe, and so that's not a success for us. That's the only good outcome we want is for the one that's best for the child, not necessarily what the parent wants, because the parent will always want their child to be with them. They don't want their child to be removed, but if it's not safe and to be there, what's best there is that child being in the safest place for them.
So do you work with people that are already in the system as well then? Have you ever worked with people who are in care and already in young offenders or?
Not in young offenders, no. So the work that we do is preventative, and so typically we wouldn't work with somebody who is, or the youth inclusion project part that I'm sort of mostly responsible for, wouldn't work with people who have been involved, who've gone to youth offending or sort of been in maybe think about Weatherby, which is a young offenders, or Adelbeck, which is another secure unit. we wouldn't work with people who have been there. We looked after children. We do lots of work with looked after children, or people who are going through care proceedings. But occasionally we'll pick up people who've maybe been involved in crime. So it might be that the Youth Justice Service are doing a piece of work with somebody, but they want something slightly more. So a young person might have like an order, or an out of court disposal, or a court order to say you need to do 12 weeks worth of work with the Youth Justice Service looking at X, Y, and Z. Youth Justice team might say we've finished that piece of work, but we want something to continue in the community, but also do some more focused work around stuff that we've kind of dug up, or stuff that's come out of the sessions that we've done, maybe some harm prevention stuff or some general emotional health and wellbeing stuff, in which case they might refer to us. So typically we wouldn't work with somebody who's already engaged in offending, because that's not then preventative because they've already engaged in offending. But yeah, I guess that's another kind of upside of the work that we do as a charity, is that we will be flexible and understanding, whereas some services just go, no, this is the criteria, you don't meet it, we're not going to work with you.
Yeah,
we're given the freedom to kind of see the benefit of that work.
Yeah.
And say, I mean, you might have already engaged in offending, but it's the first time you've engaged with some work, sort of supporting around it, and we want to kind of keep that momentum going of doing some work and thinking around self-esteem, whatever it is that might be useful to work around. There's something called ROCLA, which is Reducing Offending for the Children Looked After, and that's sort of like a panel of professionals, myself, someone from Youth Justice Service, police, Forward Leeds, other kind of family support services, and social workers who are working with children who are looked after can come to that and ask for some support or ask for some advice. And so often we'll pick up some young people from that, recognise that those children are not necessarily more at risk, but there's lots of additional factors around potentially like emotional health, family dynamic, engaging in substances, behaving in the community, potentially been moved out of one area to a new area, which adds a level of maybe sort of concern or professional worry. So that's a space where professionals can come and discuss a case, and so the social workers might say, we're a bit worried about a person, we don't really know what support's available, or can you give me just some ideas about what I can do? And so we pick some young people from that. The social worker might say, actually, do some one-to-one work with them, so we'll do that bit of one-to-one work. So I think that's probably fairly unique to Leeds. Leeds has got a child-friendly city, and part of that is around supporting people who are looked after, trying to do our best around supporting children who are looked after, because that they are obviously experience a lot more than lots of other children, and so adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, lots of those negative experiences and trauma add extra difficulties for people.
Yeah, I'm going to throw the question in here. So in terms of Brexit, will that affect anything? I mean, potentially off the top of my head, maybe funding for you if there's any ESF funding, but also potentially with some of the clients. I mean, there could be economic pressure on people, which causes more problems, which leads to an uptick in the amount of people that you have to contact. Like, have you seen anything as yet? Do you expect anything, or do you just not know what to expect from it?
So not for my project, but another project within Barca and within the city is funded by the European Social Fund, is it? So they are funded by them. They have had an extension, but I think as a result of Brexit, they won't be able to access in the future. Yeah, so that's probably the sort of funding element from it. And obviously it means we won't be able to access that fund. We don't, or my project doesn't currently access anything from there, or hasn't in the past. Not a particularly big loss. But we do have families within Leeds who are impacted by it. Right to remain stuff.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so that is, we've got people who've got to apply for that and to apply for like settled status and things.
Yeah.
I think it's a cost of maybe £1,000 a child.
Yeah.
So trying to find that money is difficult, and especially so we've got families where the children were born here, or maybe some of the children were born here, but some of the older ones weren't, or I think it depends. It's very complicated, isn't it, around like parents and whether they were, how long they've been in the country for, and whether they've got settled status. But I think lots of the parents that we work with have got additional needs, not necessarily in a learning need sense, but in some maybe like poor mental health themselves, or issues around finances and managing finances and the behaviour management of the children and accessing family support, and then have something else really complex to understand. Process is difficult for them, and so it just adds another level of something that is confusing and difficult to understand, but then also adds that emotional pressure of I need to get this sorted, but actually I'm not in the right headspace to be able to get it sorted, and I don't actually even understand the words that are written on the paper because I don't really read English very well. And then I've got to ring the number to then get put on hold to then ring somebody else who's going to then send me out in my sort of original language, or I've got to go waiting down at Citizens Advice for 2 hours, but I've got the children to pick up and I've got someone to drop off at a nursery here and then here, and you just think, how am I actually, even myself as like a fairly competent English speaking adult would struggle with all that stuff, let alone people who are maybe non-English speaking single parents, children with additional needs, mental ill health themselves. Adds an extra level of something, a level of pressure. Yeah, what the answer to that is I don't know, because we can't go back and turn time. I don't know the support services available either that will help with that easily and quickly. And I think maybe part of COVID for those, so engagement is a really important part of the work we do about how we engage, keep people engaged with us. COVID has kind of provided a nice excuse for those. Nice excuse is really a bit harsh, but because there's all sorts of reasons why people don't engage, but it gives a nice kind of thing, oh, actually don't come around because I might have COVID, or we're waiting test results, or actually I just don't really feel comfortable. And that isn't, it isn't a great thing, but when you understand their context of maybe sort of poor mental health or anxiety, or maybe they just kind of thought of having to deal with the stuff that they've got to deal with, they find very difficult, then you can understand. So keeping people engaged and getting people engaged of support, particularly around that, is going to be really hard. That for me has been the most difficult thing I can see from COVID, is just being consistent. So from our work, consistency is like key. We want to see young people on the same day at the same time in the same room.
To have regularity.
So like they know they're seeing me on a Tuesday at 1:15 in that room in school, set place. I'm going to come, I'm going to be the same person, as in not just the same face, but I'm going to behave in the same way. Because when you're working with children who've maybe got emotional health needs, actually they want to know that life is predictable, and that you are safe, not in a safe and dangerous sense, but you're like an emotionally safe person for them to work with. Being consistent in COVID is non-existent. Again, maybe not fully true, but so many bubbles bursting in schools and children not being in school, families waiting test results. You may be having to wait 2-3 weeks before you see them because they're isolating, because they're not in school. We already work with children whose attendance generally isn't great. We've got people who've got attendance of like 60-70% and less. And so when there's COVID involved and they can't come into school anyway because the bubbles burst, then it just makes our work even more difficult around having to like chase people and make sure that people are safe, make sure that they've got things that they need, and do that bit of work that we want to do with them around understanding the way that they feel and why school's important, what's going to be the consequences if you don't come to school, not just in a short term, you might get a fine or you'll get detention or whatever, but things around, you'll lose your friends. You won't know how to be friends or make friends with people because you're not socialising with people. You'll lose track of what's going on in school. You won't have a sense of routine getting into work then when you aren't used to doing stuff. And people will just think, oh, I'll be fine because I'll be older and fine. But routine is key.
And I think for a lot of people, the past year has kind of been like that long school summer holiday, like Peter cases of like, you come back from your school holidays, I can't write anymore. And it's like, I think we've had that collectively at a global level for a lot of people. And it is kind of relearning social skills, and especially after the last lockdown, or kind of waiting it out. You need to learn to get back in touch with people and make an effort. And how do we spend time with each other? Because there was nothing to talk about during the lockdown. It was all just like, oh, this is all bad, isn't it?
Yeah, no one's done anything, have they? So
exactly. What have you been doing? Or have you watched the same thing that we've all watched? Yes, I have.
Yeah, we've all binge watched the same programs, haven't we? So.
So from your sense on the ground, I mean, obviously this is a strange time to ask this question, but sort of over the period of your career doing this, or let's say within your time in Leeds, does your sense, I mean, obviously this is going to be biased because it's just based on your own personal experience, but is your sense that it's sort of, are things getting worse? Are they getting better? Are they stable? Are they about the same thing? Or, like, do you see any difference over time in the services that you have to and need to provide, and also your ability to provide them? I mean, if you can't answer it, you can't answer
Oh,
it.
yeah, I can answer. I'm just trying to find the words.
It's not the best structured question.
No, it's not the question. I'm just trying to. So let's think about the time frame. So let's think over the past 100 years, things have got better in many ways. I mean, people live longer, live healthy lives. Children are engaged in education like they've never done before, have access to technology. We're the most connected in many ways than we've ever been, in a global sense. Do you know what I mean? Travel is probably cheaper than what it was 100 years ago. Children aren't dying at 10 years old because they spend their life up a chimney. So things are better than what they were 100 years ago. But it might, I can see a shrinking of services that are available for people who are in need. So that might be that services have got less capacity to offer support. Services just don't exist. They're not there anymore. Their referral criteria is tighter, whereas people might pick up sort of general family support, actually really has to be targeted now, or youth groups aren't as open access. They've got to be referred in or signposted in. Yeah, budgets are tighter for everyone. Yeah, and that's a funding issue, which is a political issue, and how things are funded. You see an awful lot about how the council, budget cut and stuff like that, but council tax going up. But that's all from central government as well, isn't it? You look at the amount of the council budget from central government has dropped by 70% or something, hasn't it? Don't quote me, it's probably wrong, but it's a massive drop from central government, and that has a local impact and a community impact.
It's been ongoing for well over a decade. These sort of contraction of services. I mean, people quite often still think that it's only been in the recent years, but it's it's been long term, and that makes a difference in the long term.
Yeah, and it won't ever come back as far as I can see.
But there must be the I suppose not quite a silver lining, but the kind of counter side to that is that with the technology and connectivity, there must be a lot more freedom, and it must be a lot easier to set up some things and some types of activity than it used to be. Or would you say it's about the same?
I guess maybe it is easier in some ways, because you can start a group on Facebook or get a group of people on Instagram together, and people who are passionate about something will do something together. There's thinking about back home, and I see people who organise litter picks on the beach and stuff, and even where I am now, I live in Leeds, and part of a Facebook group, because that's what you do. You join a Facebook group for where you live, and all people who moan about the bins not being emptied and stuff. But actually, there's lots of people on there saying, "I found these keys. Do they belong to anyone?" Or I've been out litter picking. I picked up 15 bags, and people call it wombling. They do it all over the city. People going out on their own back, picking up litter. People who are organising groups and youth groups for themselves, and lots of community-minded people who say, "I want to do this." And we get messages at work pages saying, "Oh, I want to do this," or "I've thought about this. Can you help me put something on?" Or can you connect with people or businesses who's "Oh, I've got this. Can we do something?" Or Somebody who runs like a computer repair shop, I think it was, and they've got in touch with me like, how can I I've got like loads of computing and gaming stuff, I want to like open it up for people, and like he's gone off and taken it and he's doing it. And there's an organisation called Care Bears in Bramley that Barca connects with quite a lot, just because they're in Bramley and that's where a lot of our services are based. And they offer like food parcels, but like groups on, do garden makeovers, and it's just people that are like volunteers and put on like woodworking groups, so people just come and learn like woodworking. Yeah, they were recognised recently within like the Queen's birthday honours list as well, because they're just like they do a crazy amount of stuff, like making food packages up for people and parcels and doing cooking stuff, and just connecting with those vulnerable people in the community and just open it up and connect people and get people involved in doing things that are positive. And so in many ways, the world can put on stuff easier and better because they just connect with people. Do you know what I mean? You can just put something on Facebook and it's there, like come to this place and let's get stuff together and let's do something that you're interested in.
Even with the resources as well, I suppose. Like, we need a trestle table, we need this, we need that. Can someone bring it here?
People are just incredibly generous. Like the people who will just give stuff and give their time, but also just say, "Oh, I've got this lying around. Do you want it?" Or we have people like donate gym equipment and things like, "Oh, I've got all this gym equipment. I don't use it anymore. Do you want it?" And like, we'd rather it went to a charity than them sold it. Like we could sell it and get 50, 200 quid or whatever, but they're just like, "Oh, well, you can have it." I'd rather someone used it who wanted it and can do some good than not. Yeah, people are just generous.
Do you ever get ideas from? I imagine that you would kind of encourage them to give you ideas for sessions and things like that from the kids. But do you ever get any of them kind of spontaneously coming up with like, do you know what, this would be really good, I'd really like to do this? Like, have you had any ideas, that anything sort of unique that stands out to you?
Not off the top of my head, but like people, part of what we do is like consultation, like what do you want to do? Like, let's plan a summer holiday program. We want you to be involved in designing the stuff that we do because we want it to be for you rather than like us just thinking as adults what we think is interesting. You might go, it's boring. So we often do like activities with like Monopoly money and be like, look, you've got £600 in Monopoly money. What are you going to spend it on? What are you going to buy? Do you know what I mean? Are you going to, a graffiti artist costs £150 a day, say, or you can go to Flamingo Land for this amount of money and work out stuff for them. And like, you'll get 15 people to this for that amount of money. What do you want? What would you spend it on? Or you could go to skate park for £2 a person. Now, are you going to do that, or are you going to go to Flamingo Land for 10 people, and just get them involved, and also like thinking about how much actually stuff costs and
understanding the logistics of having to do something. So all useful life skills, just doing stuff, isn't it? And having, like you said before, just giving people more and more experiences and the opportunity to have them. I mean, there must have been times where you've done a particular project, like have you done any sort of historical projects on local areas or anything like that, where you do a bit of local interest and, you know, they kind of contribute something and bring something to it? I'm thinking the sort of stuff that I would do in school occasionally as well.
So the not within the Youth Inclusion Project, but definitely within Barca, we've done stuff around like community murals and that kind of stuff. And you get kids involved in like doing litter picks and tidying the community up and community gardening, that sort of stuff. Yeah, quite often. The project that I mentioned earlier on, the DIY collective, that was a lot of that sort of stuff was about like putting on events. So the idea initially was around like putting on a music and arts festival. And so that was me as a like 13, 14-year-old with some people who were up to sort of sixth form age, and we'd organise a music festival. I don't know if you know Scarborough, but like we'd use the Spa for it, and we'd have maybe like 2,000 or more like young people turning up, and we'd put that on. We'd obviously fundraise to get the money. We didn't have a youth worker. There was kind of like a youth worker who would observe the sessions, but they wouldn't like be involved in us what to do.
Safety and insurance. Yeah,
essentially. But like we had responsibility for a building, which you can imagine what the kitchen was like. With like I had a set of keys as a how old was I? Probably like 16. I was a key holder to a building that another like me and another 18-year-old were responsible for, and that's where that was our youth centre essentially, that we had like keys for. Now a really nice cafe. But yeah, we were responsible for like organising little gigs, and we'd do fundraising, write funding bids as teenagers, and arrange artists to come and do stuff, book bands, have to buy arts and craft stuff and artists to come in, pay for the hire of the venue, organise sound systems, like big sort of like sound system from festival companies, organise security guards, and we were like teenagers and organise that. I think there isn't the budget or the trust maybe from professionals to do that. I don't know I don't know what the risk assessments from the council were, because I was there. I was like, we were teenagers and we were responsible for that, but we had to like fundraise and organise stuff. But I think as services have become more like targeted rather than open access, you obviously are working with more at-risk, vulnerable people. Maybe there's more like professional supervision of stuff, and there'll be organisations that will definitely do stuff like that. I think it's a bigger things. I think are much less likely to happen now, and maybe that's just as a budget thing with where things are in the country. But that sort of big art thing that we organised, like, was massive. Yeah, it's crazy.
So what's the future hold? I mean, like, do you see yourself changing career, or are you with this for as long as you can be? Do you expect there to be kind of developments, changes in the future, or do you see this is youth work, this is how it's been for X many years, this is how it will continue?
Youth work will always change, because things pick up and things come, some things go, and the way that young people are affected by stuff will probably change. Some things are always going to be the same, like school. You're a teenager, and so you're hormonal and you fall out with your parents. Them things are always going to be the same. But I think the way that we sort of connect now is wild. Yeah, like Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok and stuff, and things is kind of like this weird like false in some ways, and like, or the way that you sort of connect with your friends is different. So you're like, your security network and your support network is different. So you might be friends with people who are on the other side of the world, and they're your friend online, but not in real. Like, you don't have a real life relationship with them because they're not around the corner. They're not people you sit with in your classroom. And I don't know, maybe that support feels different. I don't know. Yeah, so youth culture will always kind of change and develop in many good ways, many challenging ways as well, as it always has. But there's going to be people who are supporting them and there to listen to people.
Do you see yourself always kind of wanting to, I mean, I get the impression you always want to be kind of like front facing and with the clients, service users, whatever term that you would use, but with the kids essentially. Have you found that you've sort of more and more working towards filling in forms and writing reports as you've progressed in your career?
Yeah, so I don't hold a caseload anymore. So I would have, maybe a year and a half ago, I became like a sort of senior worker, and that's more around doing the stuff behind the scenes, around getting the referrals and putting on the activities and booking stuff and filling out forms a little bit. But we always still try and connect and doing shadow sessions, go to groups. I still staff a group a week just to kind of make sure I'm seeing people. And like, if stuff needs covering, then myself and like the other managers are always wanting to like cover stuff and be there. People need someone to go on a visit with them, then we'll always try and go and staff stuff. But yeah, so there is kind of like a different side. So like, I definitely like enjoy this side of stuff, because lots of the work is around maybe talking around cases that are stuck, or where people need support, and trying to maybe ask the professionals questions about how they can think differently about the people that they're working with. Yeah, so people might want to just like put a referral into us and be like, oh, have you tried this? Or I know that you've said that they've just engaged with this, then maybe they need a bit of space rather than engage with another service straight away. Or just trying to get them to think a little bit differently, because when you're kind of always thinking about a case or a client or a young person or a family, then maybe you don't always see it from a different perspective. So we kind of give that different perspective, or help them sort of other professionals to think in a different way. So I definitely like that kind of problem solving side of it that we do. Definitely really I really enjoy doing. Leeds has got things called clusters, which is where schools kind of buy in a similar area, buy into together to paying for like family support workers and counsellors, therapeutic support. We go to clusters, and schools within that cluster can refer client like cases in to be discussed or ask for some support. And so lots of my work is kind of going to these cluster meetings to discuss cases with them and saying we could offer some support, or have you tried this, or offering some different sort of services that we might know of in the city that haven't been thought of by the school. Yeah, so I hope I probably will always be doing something around people in a supportive capacity. I line manage like most of the team as well, so get to do a bit more like youth inclusion project sort of problem solving as well around cases and looking at how best for the people that my team support. So yeah, I probably will always kind of do something around children and young people and supporting them, making sure that that's what that looks like in the future. I don't know. Who knows? Lots of stuff has come up, like online groups and how the world is changing.
Yeah.
I feel like face-to-face is always going to be the thing that people do, because I don't know, maybe it's a professional kind of, or my personal sort of thought around, I don't know, you just feel a bit more connected in person.
Well, I get the impression that that's kind of the essence of what you do. The essence of what the role is being there. It's like someone who is there. When other people aren't there, it's like, well, I'm here. We can play a game. We can have a chat. We can make, we can do a thing, or we can not do a thing, and you can just sit and be with someone who's not going to put pressure on you for a bit.
Yeah, and like we are doing that now. We are sat talking to each other. But I feel like face to face, there is kind of a different vibe. Maybe I don't want to be like too like hippie about it, but maybe just that kind of like feeling people's energy. And
yeah, you're picking up on the presence. You're picking up on like micro expressions much better than like rubbish video frame rates.
Yeah, and also like you can only see like here. You can't see what my hands are doing really. You can't see what my feet are doing and my legs and
or how open or closed you are. Or...
Yeah, and I don't know. I think just there's something about feeling like someone cares and is bothered about you that comes across more in person.
Well, yeah, you wouldn't get the same feeling as an example, like of when I've been in relationships of like sitting in a room with your partner and not talking, but being able to just sit there and be comfortable and just enjoy the presence of someone else. Or if you're a pet owner, like having the pet there, like having that company, it makes a difference. It's a change in circumstances. You're not alone,
Yeah, and that's that sort of feeling of loneliness and isolation, which is often like that. I'm sure we all feel at times, but I think for young people sometimes they feel like they internalize lots of what they think and feel like they're alone, even though actually all the things that they think and feel are generally very normal. But having kind of someone who's sat with them rather than across the screen, is someone sat with them and understanding. I don't know. I feel like it just communicates and resonates a bit more in person. But I mean, I think online stuff it's a real like amazing tool, and maybe it's just that I don't utilize it. But I bet there are groups doing amazing stuff online, connecting with people and people who are really people. I think it works when there are people who are like passionate about something and they can get together and they're motivated off themselves to be able to do stuff. Maybe that's good, and they can maybe communicate outside of that group online and things. Maybe that works well. But maybe it's just because of the age of kids that I work with, that sort of younger age is maybe a bit more difficult to do online stuff. We did some groups online, and they were nice, but I feel like in person, maybe it's just me, like in person, feeling like connected with people.
I don't think it's just you. I like there is it is always much better to do it sort of live, and like I've heard from people who have been, they've either had to give talks or give classes or whatever, and you're looking at 15 faces or whatever on a screen, and small screens or at the side. It's like you can't give any individual attention. You can't even have eye contact with people. You can look in the lens of your camera, but that doesn't guarantee that you.
And I did something the other day where everyone had their mics off and their screens off, and I'm like,
is there any point to this?
Yeah, I just think we've got cameras, we've got them for a reason, so we can feel connected and have that bit of like face and things. But you just turn your camera off and turn your mic off, and you might as well not be there. So.
Just turn the mic on occasionally. I'm still listening.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I'd appreciate it because sometimes it feels like, yeah. I go to so many meetings on Zoom, which is amazing, but sometimes when they're all off Zoom, when they're all off camera and muted and things, it just makes it so much more painful. Get your camera on. I mean, I was wearing a grotty t-shirt this morning and was still on my camera, and my hair was a mess. And but just about communicating easier and nodding along as someone does something and smiling when they said something interesting, and just trying to pass non-verbal cues onto them that I'm listening and appreciate what they're saying.
Yeah.
So now it's time for you to pass on some verbal cues to me that you're listening and get some feedback to me. You should know where and how to do so by now. Thank you again to Craig for being my guest. Thank you again to all my guests, and thanks to you, Buggerlugs, for listening to this. Please consider supporting this podcast further. I need champions for working hours, and that's exactly what you will be by giving £1 a month via Patreon to this podcast. That's right, it's only £1 a month for allowing us to support and grow this podcast. Go to www.patreon.com/workinghourspod to sign up and offer regular support. So if you're listening to this, then I assume that you have some connection to Leeds, like living here or being from here. If you're that person in Leeds or from Leeds and you haven't done a record for this yet, send me a message now and let's record your working hours session. Email this podcast, workinghourspod@western-studios.com, with a short bio and some suggestions of your availability. Or just send me your feedback, questions, comments and queries. You can follow this show on Twitter @WorkingHours3 and on Instagram @WorkingHoursPodLeeds. I'm really interested to hear from anyone in Leeds or from Leeds in whatever industry, sector or role you are in. What is your experience? How do you feel about work? What do you like and not like? What do you do, Leeds? Please remember to like, share, follow and subscribe to this show. Next time on Working Hours, I'll be talking to Anna from Linking Leeds. Come back tomorrow for that same Leeds channel. Working Hours is presented, edited and recorded by Simon Treen for Western Studios Leeds Limited. The music was The Bees from Chopin's Etudes, which is in the public domain and was taken from museopen.org.